PR Connections Radio presents.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. My name is Guy Dawson, and I am your host. And back in 2020, I did a series of interviews that were very relevant for the times. I interviewed a group of people who were a part of an organization that was supporting the families of people who were incarcerated. And it was just really an interesting experience for me to have gotten the perspectives of all of these families who had family members who had been incarcerated, many of them here in Las Vegas, but there were other places in the country as well that they had been incarcerated. And I think a lot of times when we think of the incarcerated person, we only think about that person, how it affects, whether they're guilty or they're innocent. But a lot of times I don't think we focus very much on the families of the people who are incarcerated. And through those interviews, I got to connect with a lot of people who had some really chilling, sometimes graphic stories about experiences that they had had with law enforcement. And here we are almost 3 years later. And I have a good friend of mine named Laurie Benson, who I interviewed back in 2020. And she has returned. She shared the story of her son's incarceration at Clark County Detention Center a few years ago. And ironically, her son is still incarcerated at Clark County Detention Center. And so I wanted to have her come back on to talk about her situation, share the story about her son, and just allow her to be able to share with all of you this journey that she's been on with having a son who's incarcerated. Laurie, welcome to the PR Connection Show.
Thank you, Guy. I appreciate it.
And your son's Your son's name is Nathan Benson.
Yes.
And he is pretty well known. I know that there was quite a bit of media coverage of his case many years ago. So there might be viewers out there who've heard about it, but would you like to share with all of us about how your son got incarcerated?
10 years ago, he was charged with a murder case and has been in Clark County Detention Center ever since. And that was April of 2013. And he has pled not guilty, and he's been sitting in pretrial services this whole time. And they have kept him in isolation 23 out of 24 hours a day because of how serious the charge is. Well, a murder case, you know, they're not out in open population. So he's been in isolation, and he has mental illness, and they've been giving him his meds off and on, over-medicating him. He's been in a very inhumane situation for a long time.
So he's been in county jail here in Las Vegas for the last 10 years.
Yes. Yes, he has.
I guess a lot of our audience out there would probably question that. Many of us, we know people who've been incarcerated. Most people don't stay in county jail for 10 years. So can you share with all of us, why is this happening? Why has he been? Usually people go to county jail, they go to trial, they get their sentence, they go to prison. Someone being in county jail for 10 years is almost unheard of. Can you share with us why this is happening?
Well, Guy, I'm still pretty confused myself, because he should have went to trial by now, or they should have put him in a mental institution if that's what they see fit for him, if he's not fit for trial. Because they say, you know, they have scheduled 6 trial dates for him, and he has not seen one of them. Because every time right before the hearing, they say that he's incompetent, and they send him to Lakes Crossing, and he gets evaluated. He is found competent. They send him back. And then they had set a trial again for him for another year, sat there for a whole year in isolation, with no commissary, because he was shot in the stomach by the cops, and he still has a colostomy bag. So when you owe medical bills, they take your commissary money. So I'm surprised that he's still breathing air in there, actually, because that he's still alive, because he's malnourished. It's unsettling. It's cruel and unusual and very unacceptable punishment. And even his public defender said this last time around, told the judge, said, my client, Nathan Benson, has been treated worse than a prisoner of war has. And he continues to sit there now still, because they continued it again just this last week.
And you say he's represented by a public defender, so I would imagine he's probably had many public defenders through the years.
He had Christy Craig was his public defender for the first 6 years, and then she went on to become a district court judge. And so now he has Ed Kane and Sarah Hawkins, which is assistant deputy chief public defender.
So he hasn't had a lot. He's only had a couple of public defenders through the years.
Yes. And it just seems like they want to avoid trial because he won't take a deal. There's no evidence that he is guilty, and not that I've seen, that he is guilty of this murder. And I have suspicions that maybe he was shot unnecessarily. I don't know, like they don't want the case to be heard, or, because now that they just want to have him be put in a mental institution and not see trial.
So the judicial process would be that he be found mentally competent. Please correct me, because I'm not claiming to be any expert on the judicial process. But,
me neither, right?
Right. But it would be that he would be found mentally competent enough to be able to stand trial for his crime that they say that he committed, and either they find him guilty or not guilty. But what you're saying is that what they really want to do is just send him to a mental institution, and he'd probably spend the rest of his life in a mental institution. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not sure about how long he will stay there, but that's what that's what they've been pushing for this whole time. But every time he has gone to Stein, which is a mental institute here at Charleston and Jones, they found, all the psychiatrists had found him competent this just a few months ago, and numerous times he's been found competent. And I just don't get what's going on. I can't get a straight answer from the public defender. My son has full-on schizophrenia now, and what the definition is of schizophrenia is they can't decipher what's real and what's not. So when you're in isolation, it definitely exaggerates the illness, and is very confusing, for me. Or if I go to talk to him, at one point he seems okay, and then other times not. But they also regulate his medication there differently from, it's a lack of his medication that they give him, a lack of or too much. I'm not sure. I still don't know myself. I'm still in the dark pretty much when it comes to his case and what's going on and why. And the Confidentiality Act prevents me to only know so much also.
Right. So being his mother, he has an attorney that's representing him, but he has this whole added element of the mental illness. By the way, I know you and I have talked. I have a brother who's schizophrenic. So I really understand the challenges and the dynamics with people with schizophrenia. He's been schizophrenic a long time. So I know that there's a lot of challenges that comes in the life of a person who's schizophrenic. But you, as the
Right.
mother, he has legal representation. You say that he's being declared competent by the mental health institutes that he's going to, and then they bring him back to stand trial. They ask him to take the deal. He's not taking the deal.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, that's out of
so,
the question now. It's out of the question now with the deal. And like a month ago, before they had continued it to this last week, all the psychiatrists took the stand and said Nathan is fine once he's on the right meds. He's fine. The psychiatrist in CCDC only seen him one time, and they're going by her opinion that he is not competent, but because of the meds, they fluctuate. So they all say that he is competent, but then the judge brings up a question that they want to interview him again and say, does he understand what it means to be guilty by reason of insanity, or I'm not sure if I said that right, but they said they asked my son that question, and she said, I don't want you to ask him in general. I want you to ask him the question if he knows what it means referring to him. And so we were just very confused by that. And so then she continued it. And then public defender said this last week that the psychiatrist did not show up to do the interview. So now they might be found in contempt because they didn't show up. So.
when was the last time you spoke with your son?
It's been a while, actually, because he doesn't want to speak with me now. He is paranoid. He's paranoid about something, or I'm not sure. Tell you, I don't never get to talk to him, and if I do, he is very, like I said, paranoid and hearing voices, and it's very sad for me to see him like that. Very sad, and I just can't get the point across enough to people about what he's going through and why they are doing it, why it's went this way. I don't understand it. I just know it's not right.
Well, yeah, I know. As I had mentioned earlier when we started the broadcast today, Laurie, is that we had this same interview 3 years ago, or just about 3 years ago.
Right, and it's been the same scenario. Nothing's changed.
Right, and these are some of the challenges that people who are the families of Nathan's, and there's a lot of situations I'm sure out there very similar to his. You've got mental illness involved. You've got a lot, and whenever you have mental illness involved, there's a lot of confusion just because of the nature of, is the person competent enough to be able to stand trial, and then of course if they have to be medicated correctly in order to be able to stand trial, so I would imagine that for you, being his mother, that this has to be just a grueling experience. And is there anybody out there? I know that you were working with an organization back in 2023 or 2020, excuse me, when we first got together, that was supporting families of incarcerated people. But I know that organization is no longer functioning. So who do you reach out to now? Who is there out there that can advocate for you?
I've reached out to just about everyone, including the governor, the ACLU, advocates for people that are locked up in Reno and down here in Southern Nevada, numerous county commissioners. Most of them tell me that there's nothing they can do. They said that the public defender's office has more authority than any of those offices do. So I've reached out to Contact 13. You know, this is a case where it's an unethical situation for a lot of city officials, I believe, where they don't want to disagree with whatever the court's doing or whatever the public defender's office is doing, I assume.
And so where with you, I know that it's been so challenging, and I guess if there was a direction that you could move in with this, I mean, if things could work out the way that you wanted them to work out in this whole situation, your son's been in isolation all these years, you haven't seen him, you assume that he's not doing very well. If there were a way to correct this, what would that look like for you?
Do you mean correct this like this never happened, you mean, or correct this for people in the future?
Or for let's just talk about your son's current situation. For you, what would be a fair way for this to work out for him?
Well, to get the medical and mental treatment that he needs, which is not in county jail and would not be in prison. You know, but I do feel that he deserves a trial, you know, a hearing that, you know what I mean? If he is innocent, it's hard to say because they don't tell us what's going on. They just wanted him to take a deal. He refused to. He wanted to go to trial. And for him to be in Stein or Lakes Crossing, I'm not sure if that is just a temporary hold for people or if it's a permanent place, because my son was part of a class action federal lawsuit in the third year because they weren't coming to pick up the people that were supposed to be ordered to go there in a timely manner. And so the public defender's office had sued Lakes Crossing, and it went to court, and they said, state of Nevada said, we'll open up a mental institution down here. And hopefully that will resolve some of these problems that are going on. Well, that was 7 years ago. So they're still they still haven't done anything about our mentally ill. And it's obvious because look at all the people on the street. You know, if they weren't mentally ill before they found themselves homeless, they are now because of being out in the environment or whatever. But it's the only place for the mentally ill has been the third floor at CCDC. So.
And so there you're talking about the bigger picture is that how many people, Laurie, are going through things similar to this and how the system is not addressing issues that it should probably address. And for you, 10 years involved in something like this, what do you know about this whole process now that you wish you had known 10 years ago?
Well, even if I would have known about it, there was nothing I could do about it because for him to have, because we all have heard the public defender's office are not very good representation, right? Everybody's heard that. Okay. I was told that things could have been different if I would have retained an attorney for him, which is $100,000 right off the top for a murder case. So that might have changed things up, or I'm not sure. I'm still very confused about why he has went through, besides him not taking a deal, why he sits in pretrial services. But the gentleman at ACLU, he said you can sit in pretrial services for an unknown amount of time. But in my son's situation, being mentally ill, and it just is so inhumane. I mean, the way I've seen him this last week in court, and he shakes so bad. He's shaking so bad that there's the meds that he's on, and Everybody overlooks it. Like I don't know, like the judge, not even the judge, like no feelings for what's going on in this case at all.
Yeah, Laurie, it's just so troubling the situations in our judicial system and in the jails and the prisons. And as I was saying before, I learned a lot interviewing people like you about the situations that people can find themselves in. There's a judicial system that says guilty or not guilty, innocent until proven guilty. I think the reason why I reverse that is because it seems like a lot of times in our world nowadays, it's really the opposite. And people just assume that a person is guilty if they've been charged with something. And we've seen many times that that's not necessarily the truth. But in your son's case, where he's not even getting a chance to even stand trial for the crime that so none of the evidence that could defend him and get him freed is even being able to be presented. That's the that's
exactly. And I mean, if they have all this evidence against him, then why wouldn't they allow him to go to trial then and to be found guilty if that was the case? If they, it makes no sense to me. Instead, they have him sitting in limbo for all this time. I mean, like I said, I don't think they want him to stand trial for numerous reasons because of the or what's went on with him. You know what I mean? Because of him being shot by Metro. By the way he's been treated, you know what I mean? That's a big thing. That the way he's been treated, the neglect is a big thing. And they know he's not in his right mind a lot of times if he's being over-medicated in there. He can't make sound decisions, but why has it took 10 years to figure this out then,
Yeah, it's just a mother's love is so powerful. So I understand where anyone's love, but I mean a mother's love is about the most powerful love that there is out there. So I know from your perspective, this to have your son incarcerated for this length of time, and how really inhumane that is, especially for someone who already has mental illness. But I mean, I think if a person is incarcerated in county jail for 10, oh, wow. Laurie dropped off the line. I hope she is able to come back. We just lost Laurie. That's so unfortunate. So I want to give her a couple of minutes to come back. But while I'm here waiting to see if she'll be able to make her way back into this interview, I'll just talk about these experiences that I had when I was doing these interviews back in 2020, excuse me, when there were a lot of different perspectives going around. The summer of 2020, as a lot of us know, there were protests. There were a lot of challenges in a lot of areas early in COVID. So many things going on, and I felt really, really privileged to have had the opportunity to speak with so many families out there who had family members who had been incarcerated for all these different types of reasons. And then to be able to actually get a background in what had happened. There was all types of stories that I heard. You had wives who had lost their husbands or lost their sons, or there were parents who had lost their daughters. There was just so many different stories related to their experience with law enforcement. And just like back in 2020, when I'm conducting this interview with Laurie today, this is not an indictment on the judicial system or the justice system or the police department. It was never really meant to be about that. It was really more meant to be about getting more of an understanding out there that there's a lot of sides to every story, and that all of us at some time could have a family member who could become incarcerated. And what I think all of us are looking for in that type of a situation, maybe the person's guilty, maybe the person's not, but at least for that person to get their justice. I've always felt that the justice system is what they call our system here in America. And when, unfortunately, a lot of times it doesn't work out the way that it should. And these families, just the grief. Again, there were people whose families that I interviewed who they admitted that their family member had done the crime and that they were justly arrested, but it was some of the treatment and some of the things that happened to them while they were in custody that is where a lot of the injustice came from. And so it's again, this is it's really amazing to come full circle after having done these interviews. I did literally from June until October, we did almost an interview every week with different families who had a family member that was incarcerated. And it's just at that time, it was huge in the headlines. Now, of course, the way that the world works, things are very popular and talked about a lot for a while, and then they're not talked about as much. And unfortunately, even though people aren't talking about these situations the way that they were talking about them during the time when George Floyd died at the hands of the police, and we had all the things that were going on with the protests, it doesn't mean that it's not happening and that their families of people who are incarcerated are still having a lot of challenges. It's very difficult. It's difficult financially, emotionally. It's difficult from the perspective of many of them. I know from the stories that they would tell, it would be the lack of information that they would get about the cases that their family members were involved in, the not knowingness, their inability once their family member was incarcerated to be able to connect with them, the challenges with the things that happen to people once they are incarcerated that a lot of times are not talked about. Once they're again, they're in the justice system, it can just be a very, very challenging thing. And so I don't know if Laurie is going to be able to come back. I'm thinking maybe she isn't going to be able to come back, but I'll give her a couple of more minutes and just keep talking to you about my experiences with these broadcasts. It was actually the beginning of the show. We have a show here at prconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media, called Voices of Humanity, and that's actually hosted by Sandra McKechnie. But the beginning of Voices of Humanity was these interviews that I was having with these family members during that very, very challenging time. And so with the Voices of Humanity can look a lot of different ways, but it was for me a tremendous eye-opener being a journalist, someone who always loves to research, to study, to hear what the story is all about, and then having the opportunity to interview people and getting their perspective and their experiences. And I mean, some of the stories were horrific. They were extremely touching. We had a young man who died during one of the protests. He died at the hands of police. I think the police department. I think he ended up being shot 15 times. It was really really an eye opener to interview his mother about 3 weeks after he had been murdered, he had died at the hands of police. So of course, he was not found that he was murdered, but he had died at the hands of police. And to interview his mother, to be speaking with someone who lost a son in that way, it was just so impactful. And again, all the interviews that we did throughout the summer were just so impactful for me. And it was really the beginning of the launch of this network that we have so many different types of shows on now. But this network, PR Connections Radio, was really launched as a result of these interviews that we did with people very similar to Laurie. So for all of you out there that I interviewed, I hope that you're getting resolution with the situations that you had with your family members that were incarcerated or had been incarcerated or had died while they were in custody. I really hope that there has been resolution. One of the things with Laurie being someone that I know is she has not had resolution. And so I don't think she might be able to make it back onto the podcast today, but I hope all of you were able to glean some knowledge from what she shared for the time that she was able to be on. And we hope for the best for her son, Nathan, being locked up in Clark County Detention Center. We hope that either he goes and stands trial and finds out what his fate is going to be in his court case, or that he is released, because being locked up in county jail for 10 years has got to be really a traumatizing thing. Well, that's all for me today. Thanks again for tuning into prconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media. We have a host of shows on this network that I'm sure you are enjoying, and I'll be back with you soon. A lot of different show topics that I personally will be taking on in the coming months. And again, I hope you're enjoying the growth of our network here. We've got a lot more coming for your enjoyment, this voice of new media that we're creating. Take care of yourselves and have a wonderful day.